What I'd like to talk to you guys about today is, well, it's been called Collaboration for Success. And the subtitle of that is Service Design and Facilitating Innovation. Now, I'm aware on one of the sessions today, which has not got CX written on top of it. And we're going to come to the relationship between customer experience and service design later on. It's a marriage made in heaven, if you like. And I think it'll be a useful one for us to look at. So there's still a few folks coming in. So while they are arriving, I'd like to share a little story with you guys, which I think will be useful for us to reflect on today. And this is from a study in an airport. This is a real project in a real airport in Germany, done about 4 or 5 years ago. I won't tell you which airport it was, but it was a real study. And in this study, they found out that older visitors use the airport bathrooms, the toilet, 3 times more often than youngsters. I don't know what older visitors means here, but about 2 years ago, I turned 50. And I remember that my Facebook advertising changed overnight from adventure holidays and fashion to caravans and urinary products. So I'm guessing it's around about the 50 mark there. If you're just joining us, welcome, welcome. You're very much invited to switch on your camera and your microphone if you like, if it's fairly quiet where you are. It's up to you, of course, but it makes the collaboration much more natural, I think. So we have this data that older visitors, let's say 50 plus, use the bathrooms at the airport 3 times more often than youngsters. Okay, so I'd like to imagine you work for this airport, and this year your focus is on these older guests, these best agers, the ones with all the budget, yeah, and the spare time. And I'd like you to ask the question: how would you then improve the experience of those older visitors? How would you improve their experience? Let's go ahead and use the Zoom chat for this one. If you want to drop something into the Zoom chat, any ideas you might have to improve the experience of those over 50s. Just making sure I can see the chat as well. And there it is. Any ideas what you could do to improve that experience? Have wheelchairs handy? Yeah. There's a thing about limited mobility or increasing challenges of mobility when you get older. Had a few shoulder operations in my environment recently. You know, people have been very sporty all their lives and so on. Any more ideas? Sami, Nisha, Mohammed, Bassam, Faisal, Ahmed, Yasmina. Any other ideas of how we, considering yourself, I'm not sure how to, go ahead. I can take it, Nisha. More accessible signs, bigger typography and iconographic elements. That's a nice one as well. And of course, navigation at the airport is a huge issue. And there's that conflict all the time around navigation, getting people to the gate, to the flight, and also to the other resources at the airport, like bathrooms and so on, and also the needs of advertising to use space for that. Yeah, charge them for the bathrooms. Okay, well, if they're more wealthy, that could be a fun thing to talk about as
Definitely do
well.
that in Dubai.
Yeah, well, yes, it's a tradition in Germany as well. And accessibility again, that ties in with the wheelchair idea from Airfund there as well. Yeah, I mean, larger bathrooms and spaces and so on. So there's some great ideas there. Thank you very much. And I think that all of these could certainly contribute to a better experience for older airport visitors. Some of them have got some not inappreciable costs. I mean, remodeling a bathroom when it's in use, you know, making the stalls bigger, for example, would involve maybe moving the toilets. That's very, very expensive and disruptive work to do. And even putting up more signs. The signs themselves are not terribly expensive, but the more signs we have, the more people miss planes. This has been very clearly shown. So there's a cost to the airport there of missed flights, making connections, rebooking people and so on as well, or at least to the airlines, which of course they pass on to us through the ticket prices. So there are some great ideas there. And I think all of them could be useful, but we did a classic mistake here. We made a classic mistake. And I led you into it with my joke about turning 50 and the urinary product advertising and so on, because we didn't actually ask, why are these people using the bathroom more often? And that's a difficult question to ask. It's a very personal area and a personal subject. So you can't put up cameras in the bathroom. That would be just weird and creepy. And you can't really interview people when they come out and say, hi, what were you doing in there? That's kind of a strange moment. So what this team did in their study was they spent some time using a qualitative research technique called non-participant observation, which meant in practice they washed their hands for a really long time. They washed their hands for hours and hours, and then dried their hands, and then played with their luggage and washed their hands again, just hanging out in the hand washing area of the bathrooms and observing what was happening around them. And they discovered a very interesting thing. And that was that many of these olders who were using the airport more often than youngsters were not actually using the bathroom facilities. They came into the bathroom because in the bathroom you can hear the flight information better. In the bathroom, you can hear the flight information better. When you get older, your acoustic acuity, the precision of your hearing reduces, and it can be challenging to hear things against background noise. So what these folks were doing, they were hearing the first announcement, rushing into the bathroom, listening to it again to get clarity, and coming out again. So all our wonderful ideas were what Tom Peters calls the great tragedy of business, great solutions for the wrong problem. All the things we've done would not actually have helped these people with their problem, which was to find out information about the flights. So please hold that thought. And I'd like now, had a little introduction, little game with each other. I'd like to introduce myself really briefly. My name is Adam. I'm the co-author and editor of a book called This is Service Design Doing. Here's a copy behind me. You can get it in 4 languages. And I'm quite proud of this book as a co-author because we put it together with 305 colleagues. So 305 people from the industry leaders, beginners, all kinds of practitioners, academics were involved in writing this together. So it really is what is going on and what can we do to lead, for example, to better customer experience in our organizations beyond metrics. I'm the founder of an organization called Workplace Experience. We help large organizations to change the way they create value, to collaborate differently, often around customer or employee experience. And I co-initiated the Global Service Jam, which we'll come to later. I also teach in various places, most often at the IE Business School in Madrid, which is one of the world's top 10 and Europe's top 5 business schools. So this book, as I said, a collaboration effort between many colleagues. That's why I enjoyed doing it so much, because I learned so much writing this book. And the Jam I mentioned. So the Jam is a large event which takes place once a year all over the world simultaneously. It's been a physical event until this year, but now with COVID, we've started mixing physical and digital locations. And in each of these locations, people come together physically or digitally to work together for a weekend, creating new customer experiences or user experiences or citizen experiences, products, services, digital offerings, all these things within a tight deadline of 48 hours. It's an amazing learning event. And at the end of this, we have around 700 new prototypes and thousands of people who've learned a lot about being a user and how we can help users better. One thing I want to say about we have 80 minutes left, is I'm not going to teach you service design in that time. I mean, you can do a master's in service design. It takes 4 years. You can go on great training courses, which are usually weeks long rather than days long. For the basics, about 3 days is great. And if you want to come on my courses, I'll be super happy to see you. But instead, I want to talk about behavior, because behavior is a thing that we can actually start changing tomorrow. And what are the behaviors that organizations and people in them need to be more innovative? I don't really mind if you direct that innovation towards customer experience or towards another innovation challenge. It certainly works well for that, but it can be anything else as well. So this is what we're going to do in this session. We've got 5 sections. First of all, I want to quickly fill in for you guys what I think service design is. It's a buzzword. You hear it quite often. How do we put these activities together to make change in organizations? And then the main part is going to be those key behaviors. I'd like to finish with what to do next and also have a conversation with you guys. Now, this is a workshop. There's going to be a fair amount of input from my side, and there's several key activities I want to do with you, maybe in breakout rooms, maybe in plenary, where we actually try some of these behaviors. Yeah. So first of all, what is service design. I've written it together as a hashtag here. And I'd like to ask you guys, why not, if you have an idea what service design is, to drop that in the chat. Any attempt for an idea or a partial definition or anything you like. While you do that, I'll put on some thinking music. What do you think service design might actually be? Invitation to Faisal, to Bassam, to Mohammed, to Ahmad, to Yasmina, to Nisha, Sami, Irfan, and Daniel. What have you heard about it? What is it similar to? What is it different from? Any ideas? I'll give you 1 minute for that one. Infrastructure, getting the basics right in a framework. It often does focus on the basics. And things like the Kano model tell us we must get the basics right before we try to go for wow factors, because wow factors don't work if the basics aren't there. It's no point if your hotel room has a 3D television if it has no roof or no bed. End-to-end process of delivery of service programs can be, yes. Activity of planning and organizing people. I like that one. Discipline that goes through the whole journey of a customer with a service, collection of moments or touch points that enables a relationship. This is really good stuff, guys. And I think there's some really valuable things in all of these little mini definitions you're giving me here. Thank you for that one. So yes, I think a lot of that is very, very useful. I'd like to start the other way around and say, first of all, what it's not. Planning and organizing. I like that one. So what is service design? I'd like to get one thing straight, first of all, because I don't like this name. Service design is a very confusing name because it's made up of 2 words that people think they understand. First of all, service design does not only apply to services in the traditional use of that word, in terms of intangible value creation, offerings that you can't touch. In modern service thinking, everything is a service. Your shoes are a service. Your government is a service, and so on. So service design applies to any kind of value creation. Certainly, it includes things that are traditionally called products and digital offerings, as well as things traditionally called services. And the word design, of course, is very tricky because people think design is about aesthetics, what something looks like. And service design is not about what things look like. Steve Jobs famously said, design is not what it looks like, it's how it works. And I would be cheeky and add to that. And design is even the question, does this thing need to exist? Now, these are all parts of questions that designers tackle every day. Now, service design is often spoken in the same breath as a thing called design thinking, and I'm very happy with that. I consider them to be exactly the same thing. And design thinking, I'd like to point out here, also does not take place in our heads. So all these terms, service design, design thinking, even service design thinking, design doing, and so on, these are all things that people get confused about a lot. I consider them all the same, and I'm going to use the terms interchangeably in this session. So what's it not? These are kind of some of the things that I hear often from my family members, yeah, of what I do at work. First of all, service design or design thinking is not a creativity method. It's not about getting better ideas out of people. That can be useful in this work, but it's not the center of it. It's certainly not a team building activity or a motivational activity, despite what my sister-in-law thinks. It's not about brainstorming or idea generation, though they can be parts of this work. And it's not simply a workshop or a sprint, although they can be part of this work again. It's certainly lots and lots of post-its. We see lots of post-its when service designers work because they're a tool that we use, but they're not the end result. They're just a way of getting there. Just like a carpenter uses a hammer and nails, we use Sharpies and post-its. So what is this service design thing? Well, it consists of, you can see it in different ways if you like. Going back to your methods, your definitions here, I think there was some great content there. So we're talking about service design as a tool set. There's a traditional set of tools around service design, and people add to that all the time and borrow. They're nearly all stolen from other branches. They come from branding, they come from marketing, they come from theater, they come from science, all kinds of different approaches around that, or UX, for example. There's a process linked to that, a way of moving your project through time, which I think is very interesting. It's a cross-silo language, the idea being the service designer connects the different parts of an organization and gives them a common language to collaborate together better, which is one of the key themes of my talk. It's certainly a management approach. It's a way to approach the managing of resources and people in change, in innovation, in customer experience, in all these things you might focus it on. And especially it's a mindset, at least especially for us today. That's where I want to focus on today, about the mindsets and behaviors that we need to think about. Just to get it out of the way, this is not new stuff. You can do a master's in service design for 20 years already, 25 years now in some countries in the world. It's offered routinely by big four organizations. It's used at scale by very large organizations, including the United States military. And they don't use it, by the way, to design the web page. They use it to run battles. It's a way of working across silos and engaging users and partners. So it's all about engaging people, which can be a very large motivational factor as well. And according to IBM 2 years ago, it's usually faster and cheaper, as well as being as good as or better than traditional innovation methods. So it seems pretty cool stuff. Now, it comprises of different activities. This is going through this very quickly now because I know you guys know most of this, I guess. Research activities, inquiry, ideation, generating and pre-selecting options, prototyping, building experiments, and implementation. It includes the implementation of what happens because these things lock together. You can't do one without the other, as we'll see later on. And I want to summarize with just one little quote that I often use. It's from a colleague, an Australian service designer called Damien Kernahan from a company called Proto Partners. And he often says, the brand is the promise you make and CX is the promise you keep. Yeah? And I would add to that and say, if that's true, then service design is simply how you keep that promise. It's how your people collaborate, or it's one way they can collaborate to make sure you are delivering the user experience, the customer experience, the employee experience that you promise with your brand. So let's talk about how this works. In a minute, I'm going to ask you guys to join me again for some activities and to try some things out in some breakout rooms. But first of all, a little bit of theory behind this. Now, this is the traditional view of how innovation happens. I'm not sure how many of you guys share this view, but it's becoming less and less common. We have some numbers or some very hard thinking, and they give us a killer idea, which we must protect from anybody else hearing about it. Otherwise, they might steal it. And then we validate that idea, usually by asking people a lot like us if they like it or not. And if they do like it, we implement that idea. And then, yes, we win. Now, this is a very traditional view of innovation, which I encounter nearly every day, old school. It certainly is, Nisha, yes, in many, many organizations, and it's dominant still in most organizations that I speak to. Now, the problem with it, there are three problems with it. The first one is it's very, very slow, because you don't get any results until a long way down the road. It's very costly because any mistakes happen late in the process where they're expensive to fix. And it's very risky, because nearly all of this is assumptions and in people's heads until you actually get to the do it phase, when you actually start implementing things and find out, my assumptions were wrong. The numbers didn't mean what I thought they meant. So what's a better way? Remember this one? Yeah, it's a great example of that. Yeah, we went out there and we all solved the wrong problem. Little exercise. We didn't realize what the real problem was behind folks using the bathroom. So here's a better model, and I'm revealing already, it's a circle, it's a loop, yeah? And we might have, for example, some actions. Those actions give us data. Those data give us insights, what we think the data means. The insights give us plans of what next action we might take. Now, the complicated part here is the actions, because they can be different things. An action can be, by the way, you can start anywhere in this, but let's concentrate on the circle first of all. An action might be your everyday work. You can gather data from your everyday work, get insights from that and put it into plans. Or you might be consciously researching, going out of the building to find out what's really going on. You might be running prototypes, experiments you could be running in the organization and outside it, or pilots, or everyday work again. Any of these things are activities. They give us data, gives us insights, give us plans. And you can start anywhere in this because it's not linear. It doesn't matter where you start. If you have a plan or an idea, the best thing to do is build it first of all and see what happens. Yeah. So hold that thought as well, please, because I'd like to try doing some stuff with you guys soon. I'm going to ask our moderator now to split you guys into breakout rooms. Yeah, we need 2 people for this game, so we'll put you in rooms of 3 or 4 people maybe, so you can be sure if somebody has stepped away from their PC for a moment that they still have you have at least one person to work with. You can work with this one. You can work on 2 people, or you can work with 3 people. So what's going to happen is the 2 of you in this room are going to plan a vacation. Yeah? We can imagine for some reason you're going to go away together. And I don't know what reason that is. Perhaps you both got promoted or both got fired on the same day. Who knows? Yeah. And the way this planning works is that one of you makes a concrete suggestion. For example, let's go to Mexico. And the second person will respond to that suggestion. Now, the response can include a new suggestion as well. Mexico is very far. What about Egypt, for example? Yeah, or whatever it is you want to do, but it does have some kind of link to the suggestion. And then there's a response and a response and a response, like a ping pong game. Yeah, let's go to Mexico. Mexico's very far. What about Egypt? I don't like Egyptian food. How about? And so on, like this. There's just one rule to this game, and that rule is that every response, everything after the first suggestion, needs to start with the words yes, but. Let's go to Mexico. Yes, but. Yes, but. Yes, but. If you've played the game before, just sit back and enjoy it. For the rest of you, I'd like you to notice what's happening while you play your game. It's a very short activity, about 2 minutes. Moderator, can we send the people into the rooms, please? And we'll call them back out again about 2 minutes from now. Welcome back. Welcome back. Remember, you're very, very welcome to leave your cameras on and your microphones open in this session. I think it makes the experience more enjoyable for all of us. Of course, it's your decision in the end. So I'm curious what actually happened in those rooms. Yeah? You were asked to create something, a brand new thing, a plan for a vacation. Yeah. And you were asked to do it in this yes and this yes but mode, sorry. And I'd like now to not talk about it immediately, but do a second experiment to do a comparison. So we're going to send you out into the rooms and we're going to ask you to repeat the experiment. You can even start with the same idea from the same person if you want to, or you can try something new. But this time we're going to change the main rule. This time, every response after the initial suggestion will start with yes and see how that takes you. See what's different. Observe yourself and see what's different in those next 2 minutes. Please open the rooms. Thank you.
Open.
So you have an invitation to join the rooms. Just jump on out there and have a game with each other. I guess Sammy and Yasmin have stepped away from their computers. And if you want, you can hit the button so the rooms close about 1 minute from now. Are the rooms closing?
Yeah, last 15 seconds.
Fantastic, fantastic. And welcome back out of the sessions. Hi, Samir, nice to see you there. Didn't notice you before. Welcome back. Feel free, if you like, to leave your microphones on and your cameras open. That's your choice, but it's the invitation I make to you guys. So if you like now, we've done the same thing twice. You were given a task to fulfill, a co-creative and innovative task to plan something. Yeah? And I asked you to do that task in two different mindsets. There was a mindset of yes and, the second one, and a mindset of yes but, the first one. I'd like to ask you some questions which we can put into the chat. Yeah. So in the Zoom chat, tell me first of all, of those yes and yes, I'll put a yes but and yes and, that was the order we did them in. Which of those is more familiar in organizations? Yes and or yes but? Which of those is more familiar? Irfan says yes but. Yes and is less familiar, exactly. So yes but is more familiar. Yes but. Thank you, Nisha. Thank you, Bassam. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, this is very true. And that's fine. You know, some of my clients build nuclear power stations. It's really, really important that they say yes, but sometimes, you know. And the second question is, given the task of being asked to actually make a plan, which was more effective in actually getting you towards a plan? Bassam is very fast on the keys. He's a real speed typer. Yeah. So which one got you towards a plan faster? Yes, and yes, yes, yes. Like it. Yeah. Yes, and we seem to agree on that one as well. Okay. Third question. So we got these really cool plans with the yes and technique. We really quickly developed a prototype. But my fourth question is, looking at that trip, can you afford the plans you made using yes and? Excellent. Nisha can. Good. Of course, you're all very, very rich in the Middle East, of course. Just a joke. Often people here find there's a real mix, and some of these plans have become very fanciful and very expensive, a bit overloaded sometimes. It depends. Yeah, they can be impractical. So yes and is a superpower, which gets us moving forward quickly, but it can take us to good places and it can take us to bad places. So I'd like you to hold that thought. Yeah. Hold that thought about yes and yes but, because this is part of what service design feels like. It's knowing and facilitating behavior which is yes and, which is additive, and knowing when to stop that and switch to behavior which is yes but, which is exclusionary, which reduces our options, and keeping the sweet spot of moving between those. Conflicts arise when some people are in yes and mode and some people are in yes but mode. So back to our design process. Now, one of the most common representations of the design process you might see, I don't like it very much, but it really actually shows those principles in place, is this one by the Design Council of the UK. It's called the double diamond. And the idea is that we have consecutive behaviors which are divergent, opening up and closing down, yeah, or convergent, divergent opening up or convergent closing down, divergent open up, convergent closing down, all the time. And on its simplest level, this is twice, because first of all, we have to make sure we solve the right problem. Remember the bathrooms at the airport before we serve it. So before we solve it, correctly. Yeah. So we see the yes and is the opening up, and the yes but is the closing down. That's why these things are so important in service design. The tricky part is that some people are natural yes and people, and some people are natural yes but people. So we often use these models and we say to people, it will guide you, it's a great model and so on. But then people look into service design, they're looking to design thinking, and I say, well, I've seen this model, that's great, but I've also seen this model. I've seen 4 clear steps. I've seen 7 definite stages. I've seen 5 phases from IDEO, for example. I've seen circular signs. So that's a very good model, this one, yeah, which combines design thinking with agile and with lean startup. So this is how an actual sprint 5-day session might look like, yeah? So there's diamonds in there, lots of loops in there as well. It's, So people tend to look at this and they say, I'm not sure this is real advice or typical consultant bullshit. And I would like to suggest that instead of worrying about the process models, yeah, we should accept that every single intervention we make is different. A 3-day prototyping session is not the same as a 4-year cultural change. A 3-month pilot project is not the same as a 6-month incubator session or a 1-year implementation or a teaser stunt or an introduction workshop or an innovation challenge or a sprint or whatever these things are. They're all different. Now, they all have those 4 activities I talked about, but actually, if we zoom in, we find it's much more complex. These are just the 54 basic activities that we mentioned in our book, in those groups, yeah? So this is easy to get bogged down into. I'd prefer to talk about behaviors, yeah? And that's where I come to the main part of my talk with you guys today, because I'd like to talk about the key behaviors that organizations need to be innovative, whether you call this service design or design thinking or anything else you want to call it. So I call this part of my presentation the 5 key behaviors of effective innovation. Other behaviors are available. Now, some of these are quite surprising. They don't feel like what we're used to. And I'm really happy for you guys to comment on them anytime, of course. This is what I've noticed in my 30 years in this business and other similar businesses that seems to work in organizations and which are useful things to adopt. Remember this one, yeah? We got this wrong. We all got this wrong. My screen is stuck. Okay. Are you guys seeing my slides change?
No, it froze.
Okay, so I will stop the share. And I thanks for letting me know, Afan. That's really useful. And I'll share the screen again because they're moving my end. You should now see, do you see the bathroom sign again?
Yeah.
Okay, so looks like they're working once more. Got it? Yeah. So that seems to be working your end. Are they changing now? Dum, 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 dum. Yes, please let me know.
Yeah, all fine.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Fantastic. So remember this one. We made the fundamental mistake of believing we understood the numbers. We believe they meant what we thought they meant because of our assumptions and prejudices. So the first behavior is get out of your seat and get out on the street. Yeah? A desk is a very bad place to try and understand the world from. So we're talking about research here. Yeah. Research in design contexts. And I'm sure you guys coming from a CX background have got some experience of this. So go ahead and drop into the Zoom chat any research methods that you may have heard of or used before. What are some research methods that you might apply to finding out what's going on in reality? Focus groups, my least favorite research method. Excellent, yes. Observation. That was what the airport used. That was a non-participant observation. Yes, ethnography is a wide term which includes many other methods. Immersion, yeah, doing it yourself. Auto-ethnography, that's called sometimes. Social media search, so desk research. Fantastic stuff here. Mystery shopping again has some really big bugs in it. Yeah, but it can be useful. All of these can be useful. They all have bigger and smaller bugs. Great. So I'm going to take you through some of the research methods that we commonly use in service design. And basically, we have 2 types. We have the quantitative, the surveys, the tracking, the big data, the heat maps, etc., etc. And we have the qualitative, contextual interviews, observations, work-alongs, and so on. And we tend to go towards the qualitative while maintaining a balance, because quantitative is often simply too slow. Want to move fast, remember? So there's often a tendency to have a qualitative, but back them up with quantitative, of course, when possible. Contextual interviews. This means running interviews in the situation where something is consumed. For example, if it's around travel, do it at the railway station. And you will see things there that you won't see in your laboratory. Unfortunately, when we're out of context, we can only ask the questions that we can think of. When we're in context, reality happens and we'll see things happening we didn't expect and can respond to those. It also helps people to remember what they do if they're actually in the context where it takes place. Observation, participant or non-participant. We saw this before with the example of the airport. Work-alongs. This is very common in employee experience, but also for customer experience, actually working beside the people delivering the service or the product. In this example here, the design team had to spend 3 months learning safety procedures for working on an oil rig, learning how to get out of a sinking helicopter, for example, before they could go there. That was a major investment that time. Autoethnography, using it yourself. In this one nurse, the lady in the background, is telling her colleagues about the experience of being a patient in her own hospital and how much she'd learned, how much it had changed her view of their actual task by being a patient there himself. So that means just trying it yourself. Today, you can use applications for mobile ethnography, where you ask your customers to record their own experience step by step with photographs, with text, with ratings, and so on. You can get a massive map, for example, of your airport or of your university, which shows where are the experience hotspots and low points. You can do, of course, journey mapping. And I don't just mean here in the team, I mean, for example, with stakeholders. And it might not just be journey mapping, it could be many different kinds of mapping. We call this co-creative workshops, and it's not the same thing as a focus group. The problem with focus groups is that we know that if there is any relationship between what people say they will do and what they actually do, it's a light negative relationship. People are actually statistically proven to do not what they say they would do in focus groups because of those massive social biases in them. But if you put in boundary objects so people actually build things together, a lot of those biases seem to go away. We develop key insights out of this. These are all things you can do for your research. And here's a nice example of that. This is in Michigan, where the government assistance was hidden behind a really complicated wall that you had to get through. Yeah, people had to apply for that. This actually is the form that people had to fill in to get access to government benefit. You see that? It was 18,000 words on that form. And the team here spent time with people in their context on kitchen tables, finding out about their journey towards getting government benefits. And they were able to make a much, much simpler onboarding process without that form, which actually saved the government 50% of the cost as well. So it's not just a better experience, it's a lower cost. It's a great project there by Civila. I recommend those guys. It's an award-winning project. The second one, this is the one that freaks people out the most, I think, of these behaviors that we need to adopt, is that ideas are overrated. Yeah? People always talk about innovation and they say it starts with ideas. That's wrong. We know that from our example of the airport toilet, that our ideas were all wrong because they were based on assumptions that were not true. Yeah. And also, ideas are quite dangerous. I like to say that ideas are like classic cars. Yeah. When you have an idea, it's like when you see a classic car and think, oh, that fits me. That's just such an expression of my personality. This is the confirmation bias that ideas have. I must get this. I must move it forward, this idea. Yeah. And you fall in love with it too easily because it's your own. It fits you. It suits you just like a classic car does. But unfortunately, ideas are very unreliable. We know from people like Kahneman, for example, that if an idea is genuinely new, nobody can tell you if it will work or not. Nobody. That's just not possible for us as a species. And they end up then becoming very, very expensive because you have this idea that you love and you keep putting money and money and money into it to try and make it work, just like this family with their classic car. So here's a great example of getting around that. This is the company Zappos. Has anybody heard of Zappos? Still is an online shoe retailer, which set up in the USA in the mid-2000s. Now, if you remember the mid-2000s, we didn't really buy shoes online. We'd buy books online, certainly, maybe washing powder, commodities, but not actual things that had to fit. How could that work? And this guy, Tony Hsieh, he said, you know, I think people will buy shoes online. And that's a new idea at the time. Nobody could tell him if that will work or not. You can't do any studies that will prove or disprove that. You certainly can't ask people, would you do this? Because those are the least useful questions you can ask anybody. So instead of that, he ran an experiment. He put up an online store and he started selling shoes online. And if anybody bought shoes, he went out of his house across the street to a local shoe shop, bought the shoes himself, brought them back, packaged them, and sent them out. So he didn't have to do any logistics. He had no warehouse with thousands of pairs of shoes in all the colors and all the sizes. He just had the website and he had a shoe store across the road. Now, this is a very cheap way of testing an idea, getting out of idea space, getting into reality as quickly as you can. It did work. He found out what the conditions that were necessary were for people to buy shoes online. And 9 years later, he sold his company to Amazon for 1.6 billion US dollars. Nice little experiment he ran there. The third one I want to come to is about building things together. Yeah. And in design, we call this prototyping. Now, prototyping is often thought of as a testing method. And in fact, that's only part of it. Most of prototype is actually a thinking method. It's thinking with your hands, as Ideo sometimes say. It's exploring the future through explorative prototyping. So whatever service or product or digital offering you're making, there are ways you can prototype it, just like Tony Shea did with his shoe store. Yeah. Have you guys heard of any prototyping methods? If I put prototyping in the chat, can you think of any? What methods do you guys know? I'll give you some thinking music. Storyboards. That's one very simple method. That's called a think-like prototype. You have to think your way through it and imagine what it would be like. Any other prototyping methods you guys may have heard of or used before? Sketching. Yeah, sketching can get you a long way. It really helps to groups to understand, are we talking about the same thing? And very often they'll find that they're not. Any more role playing? Yeah, I wouldn't use that word for it because people hate the word role play, but theatrical methods can be very, very useful. Simulating what's going to happen. Nice one. Okay, so I'll put you guys out of your misery and show you some of the ones that we often use. Legos can be great for prototyping. I'll come to that one in just a second. So wireframes and dummies, kind of sketching, if you like. Of course, if it's going to be a digital service or digital offering, you might sketch out the pages. And there's lots of dummy text here, for example, and crosses to show where graphics would be. But every button has a label on it. And you can actually put this in front of someone and ask them to press the paper button. And then when they press the paper button, you show them the next page. You can actually use this like a real piece of software. That gets easier if you use apps like this one, which let you, for example, draw your pages, your screens, photograph them, and connect those screens to say this button links to this page. And then you can run that, and it feels just like an app. It takes you about 20 minutes, 10 minutes to learn the software, 10 minutes to make one of those for the first time. And now you can actually build things and test them in context. And then afterwards, say to the IT guys in the team, can we do this? Now, you develop what you need to have, first of all, maybe with users. That one is an app called Marvel Prototyping App, which used to be called POP. It's an amazing piece of kit. Of course, if you use fancy looking graphics, you can even make it look real and people can believe they're using a real app. Cardboard prototyping, here doing some architecture for a shopping center, for example. Very, very quick and dirty, but it helped us even make a costing based on this that was quite accurate. Advertising value, for example, by producing advertisements of your idea, putting them in front of, it's a very rough one here, put it in front of people and say, what do you think this is? Yeah. Would you prefer to find out more or have a cup of coffee? Things like this. Don't just ask them if they would use it or if they like it. They will always say yes or no, depending if they like you. But ask them to compare it to something else. Text prototypes. If you have an idea, try writing the contract for it. not in legal language, just in 5 or 6 bullet points. What do you promise and what do you expect in return? And see if that actually gels with people. Or write the company handbook or the instruction booklets or a radio ad. These are all things that will tell you if your idea actually has value. Of course, you can prototype business models using things like the business model canvas. I'm sure you've met that before. If not, check it out. There's a book called The Business Model Generation, which is very interesting on that. And we had journey mapping with a suggestion there from Bassam. Yeah. So yes, again, you can ask people to dream with you and make a journey map together with the stakeholders. It can be other kinds of maps as well, like stakeholder maps or other things. Now, remember, this is just a think-alike prototype. You can't actually see if it's going to work or not, except by thinking through it. But if you have the right people in the room, they may already pick up some of the problems before you actually build further. When you do build further in your co-creative workshop, this is where the Lego comes in. I prefer Playmobil, which is made just down the road from me and here in Germany, which is a fantastic product. And this is a desktop walkthrough. So we have this idea, let's say for our airport or for our onboarding at the university or whatever, and we simply simulate that using pieces of paper, coins, bottle tops, or in this case, to make it slightly more colorful, we could use little figurines, little conversations, and you move it through. I don't need to explain this to children. It's really amazing. They just get it. Yeah. You play through the process. And if these seem childish to you, remember, this is the thing which militaries around the world use. They call it sandboxing, but they will move their troops on a table or on the ground outside their tent before they move them in reality, because you can discover so many problems already by doing this. When we move to here, we're now in line of sight of that hill. We must get that hill first, for example. Yeah. It's a very, very robust method to do these things. Somebody said role playing. We call that investigative rehearsal. And here we see some people, the guy in the gray jumper in the background and the lady in the colorful dress are acting out a service experience. The guy in the jeans is me, and I'm just helping out at this moment. But can you guess what the service is that they're acting out here? Any ideas what they might be doing? Go ahead and drop that in the Zoom chat, what you think they're doing. What is the offering, the service or product they're acting out? Check-in, looks like a check-in, not quite. A lot of very similar thoughts to that, but it's not a check-in. Immigration, looks like immigration, doesn't it? Yeah. There's a table there and there's something on the table and a little computer or something. Immigration, any other ideas? Security check could be that as well, yeah. Bassam's always the fast on the keyboard, you know. Real demon typer there. I'll put you out of your misery. It has aspects of all of those things. What these guys here are actually prototyping is the interface of a file upload system, something like Dropbox. So the lady has this suitcase, which represents a file. And the guy in the gray jumper behind the desk, he is asking her questions. Okay, so where should I put it? What does it belong with? How often do you need it? Is it specially sensitive? Should I put it under a special secure thing? It'll take longer to get it if I do that. Just like it was a luggage check-in. Yeah. And they're figuring out the exchange that needs to happen between the user and the interface. It will be one day it'll be a web interface or something. And once that feels right on a human level, then as a second step, they ask themselves the question of how could this become a screen experience rather than a person experience? Yeah. So I love this. It could also be, of course, look just the same if it was immigration or security check or check-in or a speed exam. Yeah. It would look very similar, but here it's a digital service of prototyping. Couple more for you. This is a great example of a similar method. This is Lufthansa and IDEA. I mentioned them guys a few times today. They had to fix or improve their business class Lufthansa. And to do that, after a few tests using Lego and things like this, they actually built this aeroplane on the ground in Frankfurt. You'll see it has no top half, but all the seats are there, the kitchens work, all the entertainment systems work and so on. And they flew from Frankfurt to New York 59 times without leaving the ground. And they tested what all the new ideas they had about how to live through this experience. Now, there's a very important point to make here. Apart from 59 learning opportunities before they even left the ground, every one of these planes had to be reasonably full. So everyone in these planes were initially students and actors, but later on, people from the organization who might later on be crew on these flights, or who might be ground staff playing a part in this process, in this experience, and so on. So after their 59 prototypes, you had about 2,000 people in the organization who would say, yes, I was involved in that project. Can you imagine the difference that makes? When it's not just 5 or 6 people saying we should do it this way, but 2,000 people saying, I'm part of this. I want this to go forward. There's a huge opportunity in prototyping, in research, and in ideation to bring in people into the project that you need as supporters. We're going to see this guy later on, but you can do all of this in the real world as well, with real customers on real streets. We'll come back to him later on. And here's an example. This is the government of Victoria in Australia, and they wanted to make service centers for the citizens in their offices and so on. And this is actually a later version of it. They started off with simple cardboard furniture and wooden furniture. And they told people, we're trying something new. And folks would come in and say, okay, well, this doesn't feel right here. This needs to be part of that operation. So let's move this position over there. And this table's too high. Can we shorten it? Because it was all cardboard and wood, they could do that very, very easily. And so they were prototyping with their clients. KLM do the same thing. And it's actually amazing how much users appreciate being engaged in this. It really boosts their customer experience. And it's good enough. Even cardboard or wood is good enough to learn something. So you've noticed I spent a lot of time talking about research and prototyping. I'm going to move on very quickly. But there is a saying in innovation, which is if you only do 2 things, do research and do prototyping. And in fact, there was a report at the end of 2018 by McKinsey, where they looked at the value, the business value of this kind of design-based innovation. They said it's very, very valuable.
Sorry
It
to
really
cut you
does.
off. I think Nisha is raising her hand. I think she
Oh,
wants.
sorry, I couldn't see that. Yeah. Go ahead. Nisha, how can I help you?
That was really long back, like back when you mentioned something about the ideas, that ideas are overrated.
Yes.
And right after that, you mentioned about Zappo, and that was an idea. So isn't that contradicting? I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, I was just confused over there.
Good question. Yeah, let's go back there. Yeah. So the point was here, he couldn't evaluate that idea in his head. And nobody could evaluate in their head. So he didn't know if it was valuable or not. And what Tony Shea did was he got the idea out of his head into a prototype as fast as possible. He didn't spend time in idea land because nobody can tell him if that's going to work. He simply has to test it. And he found a cheap and easy way to challenge his idea by building a prototype.
Then how can we say that ideas are overrated? I mean, it all starts with an idea, don't they?
No, I don't agree with you there. I think it starts with a question. Yeah. And people often say that innovation starts with ideas. I disagree with that very fundamentally. It can start with ideas because we're working in a circle. Yeah. Do you remember this thing? Yeah. It's a different version of the same graphic where we said that, I'll stop sharing from it. You can see it on my screen. Can you spotlight me for a moment, please? Yeah. Because we have these different activities which we're working on, yeah, ideas are part of this, but ideas are the one that you can't really trust because you love it too much and people can't tell you if it will work. So if you are starting with an idea, that's fine, but turn the idea quickly into an activity, turn it quickly into a prototype or into some more research, or change your business and see if it actually works. Yeah. Now, the reason I say that ideas are not valuable is because they're simply slippery, because that idea in front of you might make you $1 million or it might cost you $1 million. And you've got no idea which one of those it is until you turn it into an activity, some kind of experiment or research activity.
Got it. Thanks.
Does that make sense? Great question. Yes. Thank you very much, Nisha. And anybody, so I didn't see the hand wiggle thing. Sorry, my screen's a bit small for that. So if you want to just open up your microphone and shout out anytime you want to. Okay, so I'll share my screen again, go back into this one. So again, we're emphasizing do research and do prototyping. They're the ones that make the difference. And the guys at McKinsey discovered that you need to get 3 things right for design to be effective and to make you the money it can make you. Their research, their prototyping, and they are iteration, which we come to next very soon. So a really quick one here, because I'm almost done with these, about experts. Now, often innovation is placed in the hands of experts, and this can be very useful. I work, for example, with a large chemical company, and sometimes the workshops that we run have 40 or 50 PhDs in the room, and there's only 30 people there. You know, they're all multiple doctorates and professors and so on, and that's really, really important sometimes. But at other times, it's not so useful. Now, this guy, Shunryu Suzuki, who was the guy who brought Zen Buddhism to the US. He said, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. And that's a great quote. And it's actually true as well. Yeah. We know that experts are often blinded by their knowledge, especially when it's around, let's call them neighboring domains. Yeah. So maybe I'm an expert on service design. I've been called that before. Yeah. So a neighboring domain might be, I don't know, user interface design. There's some user interface design in my work, but it's not really what I understand. And that means it's actually probably worse to ask me for questions for innovation, basically. It's worse to ask me about that than to ask 100 grandparents. Yeah, because I tried to use service design knowledge to look at interface design, and it doesn't work. It's the wrong knowledge to apply. And this is a reason why people like NASA, for example, use a lot of crowd ideation. Back to ideas again. Yeah. So there's some problems around this one, certainly. When they have a question that they know is important, they throw it out into large groups of people to see what comes up. And they know that most of the ideas they get back are absolutely awful. 99.9% are terrible. Yeah. And 0.08% are okay. And 0.02% are really actually interesting. This is how the Apollo program happened. The person who had the idea of splitting the spacecraft in lunar orbit, landing part of it on the moon, bringing part of that back, recombining those 2/3 of the ship and flying that home to Earth, that was not a NASA scientist. That was someone as part of a more broad ideation problem. So if you do want to generate ideas, sometimes you want to get away from the experts and get large groups of amateurs or peers. And this is the last one. There's a rude word on this slide, and I apologize for that, but it's a technical term in design. And the technical word is a shitty first draft. A shitty first draft. This comes from Hemingway. Now, Hemingway is famous for the clarity of his writing. And Hemingway got that clarity because he used to rewrite every page up to 100 times. This is the third thing that McKinsey talk about. Get the research right, get the prototyping right, and iterate. Iterate means working in loops, not in a linear function, but in a circle. Yeah. And I'd like us to try this. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is put you guys into rooms again. This is a one single exercise. Let's have new random rooms, maybe if possible, of maybe 3 people. So we make sure we have at least 2 people there who are active. And we're going to ask you to tell a story. One of you is going to tell a story. That's the blah, blah, blah person here. Talk about anything you want to. Yeah. And the other person will at times, and you can do this quite often if you like, will ask the storyteller to change. And when that happens, what you need to do is take the last thing that you talked about in the story and change that completely. So if I can be both roles for a moment. Okay, so last week on Monday, I woke up early. Change. I overslept horribly, and so I missed my bus, and I had to run to work. Change. I had to ask my colleague to pick me up from home, and he arrived in his car. Change. He arrived on his bicycle. Change. He arrived in an aeroplane and picked me up. You get the idea. So whenever a change comes, I'd like you to try and redirect the story away from that. Okay. And keep going. Watch yourself what's happening while you do this, okay? Be a very short exercise, just 90 seconds in the rooms. Have a try with this one. The person who begins is the person who woke up earliest this morning. And can you open the rooms, please, moderator? And here they come. It's like in Star Wars where the ships come out of warp, everyone coming back. So let's just reflect really quickly on that exercise. I've played it many times, and there's just one main question that I have. Probably if you were the person asking for the changes, it felt a bit awkward sometimes. You don't like to interrupt somebody when they're working. You don't want to tell them, I like an alternative. And that's very true in organizations as well. Yeah. But if you were the person who was telling the story, I'm sure you agree with me that your story ended up being something totally unlike what you thought it might be. I bet it ended up being something very, very different. Yeah. And this is the important part about this. When we are in a real service design project, all these things that don't go the way we expected them to, yeah, that force us to rethink and start again, they trigger new paths, as Bassam said. Or if they don't break, we find out we're right very early on. And this is iteration. Iteration is being changed or not changed, but having input from outside, which makes you adjust your path or confirms your path. It's what makes you work in loops. Yeah, it's when you try a little bit and then you try a little more and it fails, and you try something different and it succeeds, and you try something else and it succeeds, and something else and it fails, and you try something else, and you learn your way forward through error and success. Yeah, triggering new paths. Here's a great example of that. We saw this guy earlier on. And this is the guy in the sports jacket in the middle is a member of he works at City Hall in Los Angeles. Yeah. And they had an idea for a citizen service center in the neighborhoods. Yeah. Now he could have spent a long time in idea land thinking about this and, asking great professional services companies to do studies and so on, and what this would cost and if it would work and so on. Yeah. You could do that. But they wanted to start making the mistakes early on. So they set up some cardboard boxes in the street 45 minutes after they thought of this. And they're out in the street actually trying to deliver value to citizens. Now, nothing works, almost nothing works, but it's okay. The citizens say, what can I do here? They say, I don't know. What do you want to do? And they're already learning. I want to register my car, for example. Okay, well, I could fill out the form for you. Oh, no, I can't stamp the form. It's not legal for the stamp to leave the building. Thank you. I just learned something. Yeah. So they're learning from the beginning, and you will soon learn if this is a bad idea or good idea or what it needs to make it successful. Learning from failure and learning from success at the same time, but not just learning from someone's opinion. There's a great poster we have in our office, and it says, stop comparing opinions, start building prototypes. Stop comparing opinions, start building prototypes. So this is good enough for these guys to learn. They really are learning a lot on the first day of the project just by trying something. So those are those 5 behaviors, and I'd like to translate them for you guys into action you can take. And there's one more thing to talk about, and we're bang on time to finish, maybe a little early for you guys as well. So these were the 5 things that we looked at. Get out of your seat, get out on the street. Ideas are overrated. Build things together. Experts sometimes, and start shitty, like that terrible, awful cardboard box government center we saw there, and then iterate, then learn your way forward. Has the screen gone, I'm seeing? I'll try a new share. This has not been my friend today, the Zoom. Do you see that? No?
No.
Stop sharing. Ooh, this is fun today. I've never had this before, actually. Never, ever. Share screen. Choose the screen. And how's that?
Looks perfect.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you for letting me know quickly. That's really good. Didn't lose any time there. So, expert sometimes, and start shitty and then iterate. What does this mean if you're in a leadership position? What does this mean for the culture of however much the organization that you control, whether it's 1 desk or 1,000 desks? It means that if you want your organization to be more innovative, you need to make it easy for your staff to get out, whether digitally or physically, and meet people and observe people and spend time with people, not just survey them or ask them questions, but actually hang around with your users, your partners. Yeah? Maybe this is about having the senior management working in the shop a few days a year or something like that. Focus on insights and prototypes, not ideas. When someone says, I have an idea, ask them, great, what is that based on? Or ask them, great, how can we experiment with this? What experiment can we start tomorrow on this? You need to make time and space to do that, to build things, to experiment on things, yeah, and give permission and tools for people to do that. Give access to experts and especially to peer feedback. Often the most valuable feedback you get in a project is from people like you who are not in that project. That's a very valuable resource. And it's about embracing shitty first drafts and iteration. So you can't have KPIs that keep things going in a straight line. You need to measure, for example, how many experiments do we have going right now? How often have they iterated? How often have they restarted and learned something? Because that is a direct correlation with success. That's been proved by McKinsey and other people as well. So I guess you're looking at this and you're thinking of the organizations that you work in. And for many of you, you're probably thinking, I'm not sure if this is design or some kind of complete culture change. And I'd like to talk about that culture change very briefly as the last part of this little workshop and do a little last experiment with you guys, with you guys to try that out. So this is our final breakout room. We'll mix you up again in 2 new rooms, I guess, yeah. And this time is a little bit longer, just maybe 3 minutes or something like that. What's going to happen is you're going to be working in 2s or in 3s, and I want you to invent a story together. But the rule of this game is you only say 1 word at a time. So here's an example in English. You can use whichever language works for your group, of course. The first person might say once. The second person says there was a girl who lived in a shoe because she had, and so on, yeah? And you can just tell some story. And while you're doing that, I would like you to take 17% of your brain, that's a totally made up number, take 17% of your brain to ask yourself, when does this flow? What am I doing or thinking that makes this flow? Or what am I doing or thinking that makes it difficult and awkward? Yeah. So it's inventing a story, 1 word at a time. If you like, your story can include a toothbrush and the emotion of hunger, but it doesn't have to. By the way, in this game, grammar is not important. Grammar is not important. In the breakout rooms, the person who begins is the person who is going to go to bed latest this evening. And we'll give you 3 minutes to play that game. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you had some fun with that as well. Sometimes those stories can get pretty crazy. Sometimes it just gets weird. So I hope that was useful for you. I'd like to ask you a question about the exercise you just played. And you can go ahead and tell me live if you like, or if you prefer, you can put it into the Zoom chat. It's up to you. But first of all, the question is, what blocked the flow? When was it difficult to move this story forward? What blocked the flow? Any thoughts on that? And you can just open your mic and tell me, or you can type into the Zoom chat as you prefer. What did you notice using that 17% of your brain?
I think when I was trying to work more on the grammar and I was just giving out like 1 word that was a grammar work to continue the flow.
Okay.
So that was like no ideas were coming, only the grammar was coming. And then I just told him that let me just use 2 words instead of 1. So that 1 is a grammar word and 1 is the flow. So I guess that's what happened.
Okay, so you found it difficult when you were thinking about the grammar, but you found a workaround with that with the guys. Yeah, very nice, very nice. What else did you notice which made it difficult? What blocked the flow? What made it difficult? Anybody else? Yes, being logical, needing to have a logic. I mean, a story doesn't always need to have logic. If it's a good story, then, then the moon can be green, doesn't matter. Yeah. Cool. Any more points of what blocked the flow? Okay, we've the left brain, interesting. Very interesting, because the left brain is often, it's not actually true, this stuff, I'm a psychologist by training, but it's a nice mental model, that the left brain is the straight line logical control brain, yeah, and the right brain is supposed to be the more creative one. That's interesting. So let's switch over. So what helped the flow? What did you notice? I think someone already said, Abdul already said, widening your imagination, just letting things happen. What else do you notice that helped the flow? Imagination. So what does that mean, imagination? What did you do that made your stuff more imaginative? Breaking the rules, yeah. No, changing them in your case, which is really great. Made a better story. Anything else you noticed that made it flow? Obviously the opposite, so not worrying about the grammar. It's difficult when you don't know the person you talk to. I like that very much, Abdo. Yeah, when it's with a stranger, it's quite difficult to relax and let go. And they seem to be the things that we need. Cool. So I want to finish with you guys in just over 10 minutes to finish on time. So let's talk about what actually happened. Now, I've played this thing a few times before, and I've written down the top things that people seem to answer. These are kind of the best of, the greatest hits of the answers I get in this game. Yeah. And one of them is, on the negative side, what blocks the flow, thinking a lot, really worrying, thinking about it seems to actually slow us down. Wanting to stick to your own idea. I wanted it to be a grandmother and now it's an elephant. It doesn't work. Yeah. Trying to see into the future, trying to predict what the other person will say, focusing on quality, trying to get it right or be smart or be clever or be funny or something like that. Keeping the rules. That was one we had a couple of times in our one. Yeah. And what seems to happen what seems to help, on the plus side, is really listening. It can be hard through a Zoom call. Yeah. Just starting, just trying something and then accepting what is there and building on it. Okay, so now it's an elephant. I can work with an elephant. Let's make it a pink elephant. That's fine now. Now, if you look at this chart, yeah, we have two sides to it. We have the right side, think a lot, stick to my own idea. And we have the left side, listen well, just start, try something, accept and build. Which of these sides do you think organizations usually value most? Is it the right side or the left side? I think we all know that most organizations value the right side, thinking, sticking to your own idea, trying to see the future, focusing on quality and keeping the rules. And that's fine. Again, some of my clients make nuclear power stations. It's really important that they think a lot, stick to the plan, focus on quality, all those things. But it's not so useful when you're trying to do something new. Yeah. When you're trying to do something new, the other side, just like you guys experience, seems to be much more useful. You are trying to create a new story that nobody ever told before. And in that case, the other side, the left side, seemed more useful. Again, this is what service design feels like. It's knowing which of these sides you need to be on just now. Do we need to stick to the rules? Do we need to break them? Do we need to think or follow our instincts? Yeah. And keep helping a team or an organization to keep on that is not easy, especially when they get scared. They tend to go to what they know, and innovation is scary. And this brings us to my final point today. Yeah. This is the 6th key behavior of effective innovation. And it's this: people need a safe space to try the new behavior which they need to be innovative. You're asking people to change their behavior. You're asking them to change their value systems in some way, because we're saying, okay, your experience is great, but it's retrospective. We need to know what's happening today. You're saying your ideas, they're not so useful. We need questions. We need experiments. Yeah. So when you're asking someone to change that fundamentally, you need to give them a safe space to try this. Now, that could be a particular project where you say, let's work differently in this project. It can be a physical space where you say, in this physical space, in this innovation lab, in this skunk works, we work in a different way for a while, and then we decide if we transfer that way to the entire organization. Or it can be a time set. On these 2 days, we'll do something different. Let's hold a jam, a hackathon, a startup camp or something. And in that time space will be different. I got a great quote around this one. And this is from a guy called Michael Schrage, or Michael Schrage. I'm not sure how he pronounces it. I think it's Michael Schrage. And he is a research fellow at MIT. He's written some fantastic books. And he used to advise the American government, not the one now, but the previous administration. He used to advise that administration on innovation in national security. That's a very serious business, innovation in national security for the United States. Yeah. And he says this: you don't need good ideas, you need cheap experiments. You don't need good ideas, you need cheap experiments. Think of Tony Hsieh and his shoe shop. He turned that idea, which he couldn't tell if it was good or not, into a cheap experiment. And so you can give people a space to do cheap experiments, or you can find a space for yourself to do these. That can be a physical space, it can be a mental space, it can be an organizational space. Yeah. So you say, in this project, these KPIs don't apply. In this project, this budget is not limited, for example. Yeah. So for a last time in the chat, yeah, how could you make a safe space for yourself to try something new? Any ideas? Where can you give your organization or yourself the safe space to try something new? Are there any thoughts? Got your thinking cap on, indeed. Yeah. Well, no, that's an idea. Give yourself a time where you say, okay, this is thinking time. Yeah. But make sure your thinking takes you into an activity as well. So I had this idea. How can I test it? Who can I spar off it with? What do I need to find out more? Okay, I'll leave you guys to think about that one. And maybe we can switch on to something else right now, because I'd like to just have a conversation with you guys. We've got like 5 minutes left, and I've got nowhere to go after that as well. So are there any questions? Are there any thoughts that you'd like to share now, either in the chat or in a conversation with me? What seems difficult about this? What seems easy? Network event. Yes. And that network event can be especially useful if people can actually build something there. So we use jams for this. So we use these situations, people come together and they get a day or 2 days and so on, and a challenge, and they're invited to build something. And it's like supercharged networking, because people don't just talk to each other and exchange business cards. They actually figure out, I can work with this woman. I can work with this guy. Yeah. Not just easy to drink coffee with. We can actually work together, have a problem, fix the problem, figure it out, have an argument, have a disagreement, and get over it. And that can be super, super important. Oops, sorry, I'm clicking the slides. My apologies. I'll stop that sharing. Any other things you want to talk? Failure Celebration Day. Yes, there is a whole organization around this. Yeah, there is it's a rude word again. There's a global organization called Fuck Up Nights. Yeah. And at Fuck Up Nights, people come together and they share their failures. And you need some brave people to start this in the organization, because it is a cultural intervention. And people don't always feel comfortable at the beginning to share things like that. But it can be absolutely a valuable thing when it gets going. And what I like about the this Fuck Up Nights thing is that people see it's part of a global phenomenon. So they know we're not the only ones doing this. We know there are lots of organizations around the world who are doing this, and they're being successful doing that. So it seems to make sense for us to do it as well. Yeah. Yes, I think Tata do this. And maybe the term Fuck Up Nights is not ideal for every organization, and you find one that fits with you. Anything else you'd like to comment or share with me, or any questions that you have? Okay, well, in that case, if you like, you can reach me through this QR code, or you can reach me also through my Twitter, #AdamSt.John. You'll find me in social media and so on. I would love to see you at the Global Service Jam. Some of the best jams in the world happen in the Middle East, for example, in Dubai, in Saudi, in Tehran, other places like this. So we'd love to see you at some of those. Thank you for your time. Reach out to me anywhere. And hi, Samir. Nice to see you. And it'll be great seeing you later on at the conference, I hope.